Hello and welcome to episode 1 of Touchline Talk with Odds Changer, this new show where we'll be discussing all the speculation up and down the country in the Premier League and the EFL. I'm delighted to be joined by football writer and broadcaster Dean Jones to talk about all the gossip on the grapevine, not just on the managerial front but also on the player front. Thanks for joining us again, Dean.
Yeah, cheers, Pete. Looking forward to it, mate.
Good. Yeah, obviously the transfer window's now closed, so no real news on that front. But yeah, it's coming around to that time of the year again. Managers come into the spotlight. Sacking season is started, but it looks like there's only one place we can start today on the show, and it's got to be the future of Gunnar Solskjær. After that defeat to Arsenal on Sunday, leaves United way down the table. It was his 100th game in charge of United, and it wasn't the way he wanted to celebrate it with that narrow defeat to Arsenal. Again, lots of question marks surrounding Solskjær's future at Old Trafford, and we have Mauricio Pochettino, the 8-13 favourite with the bookies to replace him at Old Trafford. And we also have Pochettino now in the country, I think, appearing on TV to talk about his possible future as well, just to increase the pressure on Solskjær. So what's your take on Man United and where are they going to go next?
I don't think Solskjær's suddenly going to get sacked. It's not going to be a reactive thing. After that Burnley home defeat in January, so many people thought that was going to be the end of Solskjær. And at that point, I was told, no chance. He'll be in charge for at least the next year. We're, 10 months down the line now. And it's that inconsistency that just isn't making any sense for United. But he always gets a good result when he needs it. And if you look at the overall picture and his league finish and getting to semi-finals, it doesn't look too bad. Defeats like 6-1 Spurs and 1-0 Man United are balanced out by wins at PSG and RB Leipzig and against RB Leipzig. So I don't think he's in any danger right now. And I think he's planning to be there for the long term. It's going to be up to Man United to decide, is Solskjær going to be the man that can lead them to the first Premier League title since 2013? I'm not so sure, but that's what they've got to decide ultimately.
Yeah, definitely big decisions to be made at Old Trafford. But like you, I don't think they'll make any rash decisions just yet. Like you said, he's got plenty of credit in the bank with those performances in the Champions League, going away to PSG, performing really well, getting the win, and then that thumping 5-0 win against Red Bull Leipzig last week. It makes it even more surprising, the performance they put up against Arsenal over the weekend. You thought they'd have been coming into that game confident, but I just think his formation just wasn't right. He started with a diamond, then abandoned that at halftime for a 4-2-3-1 formation. Obviously, then Roy Keane after was quite scathing of some of the United players, saying that these players will end up getting Solskjær the sack. Do you think it's a big January ahead for Solskjær? Does he need to go out there and make more changes?
I think he'd like to have made more than he did in the summer, to be honest with you. I think he did think that Jadon Sancho was coming, and that would have been a big thing. He's really keen to get 2 quality players in every single position. He doesn't quite have that yet. There are players that are still going to make the difference. Alex Telles, Cavani, Van der Beek. We haven't seen them make their presence properly known yet. We've seen glimpses of it, particularly Telles on his debut. But it's going to take time to transform United ultimately into his club, his team. And so United, as I say, have got to decide if he's the man, which they seem to be insisting he is, that they're just going to have to stick with it, and they're going to have to ride these waves of bad results that suddenly appear. I mean, it's the home form that is the most worrying, obviously. Away from home, they seem absolutely fine. But obviously, over his shoulder, there is Mauricio Pochettino. He's been out of work for a year now, Pochettino. So you've got to imagine that, as you say, he's starting to appear in England on TV and stuff. A year's a long time out of football, and you can't really afford for that to drag on much longer than that. I'd imagine the next big job is going to be his. I'm not convinced that will be Man United at the moment. I think they'll stick with Solskjær for a little longer.
Yeah, I think if the job was to become available, this is the one Pochettino's probably had his eyes on since he left Tottenham. He's also been linked with lots of clubs abroad. I think Zenit St. Petersburg were the latest club to be mentioned with him. We've also had the likes of Real Madrid when Zinedine Zidane was under a bit of pressure there a couple of weeks ago before that big win in El Clasico. So it looks like he's not going anywhere just yet. Yeah. There's also even talk of Barcelona before Koeman was appointed, but we know he's talked maybe negative about Barcelona due to his Espanyol connections in the past, so he might not be in that mix as well. But yeah, I think if Solskjær was to go, Pochettino seems the ideal candidate. I also maybe think Max Allegri, who's also out of work, who's believed to be learning English as well, maybe looking to come to the Premier League. He's 6-1 to be United's next manager, which might not be a bad little bet on that one. He's free, got experience, worked with some big clubs, Milan and Juventus. But yeah, I think Solskjær, nothing's going to happen right away, but it's a big week for him. He's got Istanbul in the Champions League and then a difficult away trip to Everton. So a couple of bad performances there, defeats, will just again raise more question marks. And I think this is going to be a subject we're going to be talking to right up to Christmas, probably, with Solskjær.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a problem for him having these weekly Champions League games, because it's on the back of those games that obviously he does tend to suffer. He loves midweek games. It's the weekends that are a problem for Solskjær. So maybe he needs to change the schedule around a little bit from now on to just play in midweek.
Yeah, maybe have a word with the fixture compilers and see if we can just play him midweek, and might ease the pressure on Ollie. But yeah, another man who possibly could be under pressure is Sean Dyche at Burnley. I think they've made the worst ever start to a Premier League season. Still looking for their first win, losing 3-0 at home to Chelsea at the weekend. Sitting rock bottom of the table as well. Maybe a bit of light at the end of the tunnel for Burnley with this potential takeover with the Egyptian businessman. Talk of a £200 million takeover, with also sports lawyer Chris Farnell in the background working in that one as well. I know there's been a few worrying concerns among Burnley fans of his involvement in this takeover, considering he was involved in some of the Charlton fiasco that's happened down at the Valley over the last few months and everything else. But yeah, I think for Burnley fans, they've been crying out for this type of thing, for money to be pumped into the club. We don't know much about this Egyptian businessman, how much money he actually has. We'll wait and see if he passes the Premier League fit and proper test for being a chairman and an owner of a football club. But yeah, I think it's positive signs. Sean Dyche has always said he wants money. They haven't spent a lot of money in the last few transfer windows. So I think if this takeover does happen, surely it can only be a good thing for Burnley.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, if you look at an investor coming in, you'd imagine that they've got to stick with Sean Dyche. He's been in charge for 8 years now. He's the Premier League's longest serving manager. To get rid of him and rock the boat like that would be a huge risk on the back of a takeover. So I don't think getting rid of Sean Dyche would be the answer at all. But obviously there has been friction between Dyche and the board over investment. I think Dyche thought they needed strengthening in particular areas with certain types of players, and perhaps they didn't see eye to eye on that. And I don't think he's completely satisfied with the squad he's got right now. So I think that if investors come in, they've got to look at that January window and give Dyche what he wants, to be honest. I mean, he's earned it. He's helped Burnley become this established Premier League club. And changing manager probably isn't going to solve that. So I think whatever he says, they need to stay up, kind of get it done. And if they fail from there, then fair enough, you can make that big call. But even then, to be honest, I think if you were to go down as Burnley, sticking with Dyche would probably be the most sensible answer, especially in an era when you've got new investors coming in, because you've got to trust him to build that squad. He's literally built that team that's there right now. He knows how it works best. Bringing in a new manager to try and work with those players just isn't going to be the answer.
Just moving down to the EFL, obviously lots of clubs, lots of games every week, midweek, everything's going on. Just looking at Sheffield Wednesday right now, Dean seem to be in a bit of a rut, and they can't really afford it after that 12-point deduction for financial irregularities or from points deductions. And I think started with 2 wins, so that sort of chipped into that 12 points, but it's 4 defeats on the spin for Garry Monk's man. We all know the Sheffield Wednesday owner is not quite ruthless. He's not one to stick around and wait to see if things turn around. Garry Monk's future's got to be under major pressure right now, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think Wednesday possibly even being patient by still having him there right now, to be honest. The fact that Monk is still in his position as we record is interesting in itself. He's not really a manager that stays at clubs for a very long time, is he, Garry Monk? And it's strange when you think back to when he came through at Swansea and he got his chance, kind of touted as the next big thing. He ended up being there for 77 games, and that's the longest stint he's ever had at a club. So since 2015, he's now on his 5th job in management, and he's lasted 53 games at Leeds, 26 at Middlesbrough, 59 at Birmingham. Well, he's now on 56 at Sheffield Wednesday, and I can't see him getting to 60, put it that way. It's a really strange kind of lifespan that Garry Monk seems to go through, because he obviously does enough to get through the job interview, convinces everyone that he has this great plan, starts to do reasonably well, and then it just all falls apart quite quickly around the same sort of time. So yeah, I do expect, to be honest, that Gary Monk won't be in charge of Sheffield Wednesday much longer.
Yeah, we've got the international break coming up as well after this weekend as well. So that will give clubs some time to maybe make those decisions to change managers. And I think Gary Monk's got to be probably number one on the hit list right now in the Championship. I've got a bit of sympathy for him. The squad's not the deepest. I was speaking to somebody at the weekend about Sheffield Wednesday and said the squad just lacks quality, really. I think you take out Barry Bannon maybe and Kadeem Harris, there's not a lot of attacking talent in the team. So he's been a bit hamstrung with what he could do in the transfer window because of Wednesday's problems off the pitch and everything else. So I think Gary Monk, like you said, he just seems to pop up. He must interview well in jobs anyway, that's all I would say, because he always gets a job and gets a good start and then it seems to go wrong. But yeah, Gary Monk looks like he's under massive pressure at Sheffield Wednesday, and they can't really afford to mess around, I think, now, because they're way off a drift of safety right now. And I think losing to the likes of Rotherham and Wickham in the last couple of weeks, who are two fellow strugglers, is a worrying sign for any Sheffield Wednesday fan right now. Just moving on to the player front, Dean, I know we're 8 weeks away from the January transfer window reopening. Doesn't seem that far away right now, but again, somebody who dominated the headlines in the summer, it looks like he could dominate again in January, and that's the future of Dele Alli at Tottenham. Wasn't even in the matchday squad for the game against Brighton over the weekend, which Spurs won. It just seems totally out of favour with Jose Mourinho. I think he's started 3 games in all competitions, and in all 3 of those games he's been subbed off. So what's your reading behind this? What do you think? There's definitely some issue between the two.
Yeah, I mean, I feel a bit for Dele Alli, and I think he's been hugely affected by the way that this is played out publicly. I think that it's become pretty clear that Mourinho picked out certain parts of his game that were then highlighted in an Amazon documentary that everybody's now seen. We've seen the meetings that went on and what Mourinho thought needed to improve for Dele Alli. And since that aired and, this season's worn on, Dele Alli is literally frozen out of the picture now. I think that Dele Alli's been affected by that lack of confidence in him. I think his display in the Europa League in midweek was clearly affected. That's not the Dele Alli we all know. And what do you expect? You can't just put players who haven't had any game time out on the field and expect them to be playing at their top level. Like, that just wasn't going to happen. So to put Dele out there, throw him under the bus and then drag him off and blame him basically afterwards is really poor management. And Mourinho does do this. As good as he's been as a manager, he just picks on players sometimes and it gets himself out of the situation. He's done it with Ndombele, obviously, before at Tottenham, and he's actually managed to turn things around. I'm not sure if I can see Dele Alli doing the same thing, to be honest with you. I think that I know that Dele, in his mind, knows that he needs a change right now. He's looking for a new club in the January window. Where will he go? I think he quite fancies going abroad, to be honest, and getting away from the Premier League. I think that it would be really good for him to do that as well. Have a fresh start, go to Spain or go to France. There are clubs there willing to take him on. And I think it would do him really good because Dele Alli hasn't become a bad player overnight. He just needs to play played in the right role with somebody that puts an arm around him and knows how to manage him properly.
Yeah, it's just a couple of years ago that Dele Alli was the big bright hope for English football, probably that he could be the next superstar. It's gone wrong for him probably these last 12 months or so, but there's definitely a player in there. And I think, like you said, Dean, somebody just get an arm around him, tell him he's the best thing since sliced bread, and we'll probably see the best of Dele Alli right again. Like you mentioned, interest from France. I think PSG was strongly mentioned during the summer transfer window. Also Monaco, where Paul Mitchell, who signed him when he was at Tottenham, is also in charge there as well. So I'd imagine there'll be a bit of interest in Dele Alli. But if he's available in the January transfer window, he's not going to be short of takers. Quality player, and I think, like you said, he's probably needing that challenge right now away from the Premier League, and if he wants to try and break into that England squad ahead of next summer's Euros, he needs to go and play first team football. So yeah, Dele Alli, I think he could be one of the big names moving in the January transfer window, because I'm not expecting it to be too busy elsewhere, Dean, especially now we're in another lockdown, no fans back in stadiums. There's not going to be a lot of money to be spent in January.
No, there's not. No, there'll be a few deals. Look at Liverpool. They'll look for a solution. Obviously, at centre back, they'll try and do something there. But even that, they're not going to go and buy like Koulibaly for £80 million. they'll be looking at either somebody whose contract is expiring or maybe a loan to see them through. At the very most, probably an emerging centre-back, I'd imagine, for like 30, 40 million is what you'll see there, but that's really top-end stuff. There aren't many clubs, as you say, that are going to have money to spend at that juncture. It'll still be interesting because there will still be some desperation as we get towards the end of Jan. And because everybody has been affected so heavily by what's happened with COVID, they really do need to stay in the Premier League, all these sides. So there will be some panic signings for sure.
Oh yeah, we saw in the summertime still over 1.4 billion spent by Premier League clubs. So they'll find the money from somewhere down the back of the sofa to do some spending, and still a lot of unhappy players out there who need to get fixed up with the clubs, the likes of Mesut Ozil and people like that. So yeah, don't worry, there'll be plenty of transfer rumours, I'm sure, around January. But yeah, that's it for the first episode of Touchline Talk. Thanks again, Dean, and we'll be back next week for episode 2.
Absolutely. Cheers, mate.